Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for a lower body day. Alright, this is going to be a nice long vlog. I'm doing what I told you guys I'm going to do. Surprise, surprise. We're hitting some modestly heavy singles. These are not maxes. These are no more than 90%, right? Because that's all that I want. For me as an advanced lifter, I can hit the highest threshold motor units off of weights. Anything above about 85%. No problem on a single rep. So that's really all I'm trying to do. I want to maintain some squat and deadlift strength, and I can game those workout to workout. But I just want to come in, even though my training is bodybuilder almost entirely at this point, I do want to maintain my lower body power lifts to some extent. Right now benching I'm not as concerned. I may start doing this with benching again eventually. But I do want to do that. But there is some potential to it. It can potentiate some upper threshold motor units faster on your work sets. There's some data on that. But I like doing it just to maintain a little bit of the heavy lifting, a little bit of the axial loading, and to get in and just get that little bit of moderately heavy work that doesn't fatigue me. So, when people see that, they're like, oh, so wait, there's no fatigue. Yeah, there's no fatigue to that. It's like it doesn't affect my recovery at all. So it's just benefit, and I will probably work those up over time. But right now it is focusing on building that work capacity, because everything else was, sets of 10 to 12 right here for this tri-set, and then 30 plus on the other stuff. So really we ended up working 3 different rep ranges with a ton of volume, right? At least 10 sets for every muscle group, not counting the singles, right? Not counting the singles. So what did we do after that? Because we just did an easy 415 back squat and a 525 deadlift, right? And that's fine. And like I said, I may work those up from here a little bit and just get them up heavier. Be nice if I can get to where just a 500 squat at the start of every workout felt that easy. So then I do a tri-set. And I love doing tri-sets like this for lower body because it really is good for my conditioning. It's good for my work capacity. And there's no real negatives. In other words, if you're doing a squat pattern movement and then you do hamstrings in between, or even the hamstrings first like I did, all it does to me is it feels like it creates better stability. It doesn't interfere at all. So I start this circuit with a glute ham raise, right? And I do this as a challenging. I'm leaving about 2 reps in reserve till the very end, and I've got maybe 1. And I may work these reps up on these a little bit, because I feel like my strength is coming back on these right now after cutting a bit. Because I'm kind of maintaining body weight at the moment now. I'm just going to recomp a little, then I'll trim down a little. But I need to just keep getting leaner. But the thing is focusing on overall body composition. I feel like I'm in a place right now where I can lose fat without, losing body weight very much per se. Because again, a little bit of old muscle memory, some adjustments to my diet. And I'm kind of leaning in that direction in general of explaining to people, look, you can recomp. As long as you're not trying to get contest lean, you can recomp if you keep your diet dialed in and your training is on point. My training is geared towards very large amounts of hypertrophy and not much else. Okay, it matters. It's a great deal of specificity. Barring those 2 moderately heavy singles, everything is just pure hypertrophy at this point. So what am I doing? Superset here. Glute ham raise, followed by a belt squat, then a standing calf raise. In this case, the only thing that's really fatigued going in is the calves each time, because those other movements do work calves. So, 12 rep sets are actually kind of hard on this with this weight, because I'm doing it as a tri-set at the end. And that's what I've been doing with all the calf stuff. Calves are a genetically dominant body part for me. I just started training them recently. Really, I'm not worried that my calves, they almost feel like they're growing already. Again, some want some irregular, so you can't base calf growth on videos where they're pumped. Well, probably not. I think they're getting bigger though. So what I do, again, glute ham raise, just, sets of 10. I might start working these up a little higher, see if I can get more reps. The belt squat, although the interesting thing with the belt squat, and partially the camera angle, partially the stance I'm doing, they feel deeper than they're looking there. So that's interesting to me. Like, these belt squats feel like the exact same depth I hit on that back squat. I feel my quad stretch. I feel like it's in a lengthened position. Now keep in mind it is hamstrings squeezing against my calves at this point. So that's probably a factor. I do have big hamstrings and calves. So again, that can be a factor with certain stances maybe. But it feels really deep. It's not like I'm going that heavy. These aren't failure sets. But a lot of it is, I feel like, the angles of this machine. This is the failure of a belt squat machine. I think they have a lot of merit. I think they're great. But this is one of the reasons. It's like I almost wish I had a 45-degree leg press slide. Not that I have the space or anything for it. But because I do feel like you're not limited by that curve in the thing. And it feels like my history on a leg press, it's like you can get pretty much armpits, knees to armpits with a wide stance, even with a lot of weight. So again, I'm kind of working with the equipment I have. Now the thing is, though, I've used this stuff to build big quads before. It's not going to be an issue. And I really don't think it's a case of, hey, you're just going too heavy, so it's harder to get deeper, because the depth is kind of the same when I go lighter and take 90 pounds off there and just do sets of 20. It ends up being like the same depth even on the early reps. So I'm just kind of sinking to what feels like there's a lot of tension in the quad. But when I look at the angles, just being objective, that's what I feel. But when I do look, even the granted higher camera angle, I feel like looking at them, it's almost like, can I get a little deeper than that? I don't know. Maybe I should work on it. Let's just put it that way. Let's just look at it and say, yeah, I need to probably work on it. But I feel like with this nice wide stance, though, it feels like I get a really good burn in spite of that. And that's the thing. Keeping in mind, this is just one of my quad exercises. And for the other muscles, this is probably pretty ideal. For the glutes and the adductors, I want to be clear. This is fantastic for them. The only argument would be potentially the quads. That if I can find a way to just get a hair deeper, I may get a little more quad activation, right? That better lengthened position, better stretch. But I'm doing leg extensions after. Really high pump work on leg extensions. So, does it balance out? We could argue my squat pattern movements are probably a little more glute and adductor dominant compared to the optimal for quads. But I'm following up with a single joint exercise for quads for 5 sets, twice a week. So I don't know that my quads are really being shortchanged. I have a feeling my quads are going to blow up anyways. So then, of course, we finish up again with a standing calf raise. And I try to get about 12. I've gotten 15 with that before, but it does feel like doing this pattern this way. That's what happens. So my circuits are pretty casual. It's not like I try to, no rest time. I do my 3 movements, and then I rest however long I feel like, maybe check a message or whatever from a client, 30 seconds, whatever. And then jump over and repeat the circuit. So I do it 5 times. So what do we end up doing? We end up doing a tricep with 5 sets for a quad dominant movement. Granted, we know it works other muscles and glutes. All right. Then a hamstring, or AKA posterior chain movement, because the glute ham raise does work, especially the way I'm doing it. Works the glutes and the erectors, right? But it is hamstring dominant. We need to be clear. The hamstrings are probably getting the most of the stimulus out of it. Okay, whereas in this is probably a little more balance between the 3 muscles, right? So what ends up happening with all this? Is it being just for this rotation? I feel like we could count it as 10 sets for glutes, right? Because of the glute ham raise and the belt squat. 5 sets for quads, and then calves. I don't know, how do we count that? These are all calf movements. Every one of these works the gastrocnemius. But we're making sure that it gets finished off with direct work. Again, isolating it. I almost like to count the glute ham raise as an isolation for the hamstrings. I know it works the other muscles. But really, for all purposes, it hits the hamstrings just as hard as a hamstring curl does. In some ways, maybe better, arguably, depending upon, again, because of the biarticulated nature of the muscle and the 2 different joints moving. Then we go over to leg extensions, and this is purely quad. So I figured out how to get the machine work. Notice I put socks on. I put it a little lower down. Now my ankles aren't bleeding. And this worked really good. Oh gosh, this worked really good. Now, Granted, let's talk back over about machines and angles. Do I wish I could get something that maybe put a deeper stretch? Maybe, potentially. Again, we're talking working with the equipment we have. Again, I'm working with the equipment I have versus what might be optimal for my biomechanics. If I had a way to get these to some deeper angles, it might be more optimal. But my quads got lit, and I did 30 plus reps. I'm not even counting. I lost count of this stuff. All right, but again, we're doing makeshift with what we have. All right, seated calf raises. Not the most flattering angle. You can see a little bit of my loose skin there, but look how much leaner I'm getting in general. The body fat is coming down. And again, keep this in mind. Look how much leaner I am now versus before. Or is this going to be in another 3, 4, 5, 6 months? Because I'm going to keep losing body fat. So that little bit of squish in that loose skin, that little bit that comes over when you sit down, I'm going to burn that off. Yeah? Let's keep improving on that. And that's something I've definitely had fans and clients and other people, so even some friends who are bodybuilders have said, yeah, dude, anyone talking smack when you have just that little bit, and when you're seated like that, they're like, dude, unless they're contest shredded, they probably need to shut up, which I appreciate that being mentioned. Because I've had guys who said, one of the guys who told me that, he's like, dude, mine still does that when I'm like 3 weeks out from a bodybuilding show. It's like, okay. So again, I feel pretty good about that. I honestly, now that I'm getting those angles again with the leg extension and then the seated calf raises, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I know that the progress of body composition change has been substantial. And I want to be clear, it's not where I want it to be yet. We're going to keep improving it. So I want to be clear. I'm not over here telling you guys that I have the greatest physique or anything like that, okay? Because I don't. I'm 47 though, and man, I feel like even out of gym goers in my age bracket, people who work out regular are easily top 1%. But let's keep working towards excellence and self-improvement. Made vast progress. Let's sustain it. All right, but this is the same thing. This is really long. Like, this took forever. Like, not my time, because the breaks were really short, like 30 seconds, right? But it's so many reps. This is well over half the vlog, just these last 3 exercises. Because they're 30 plus reps. And again, I think I may work on working the weights up. I probably need to add another plate on the other thing. Same thing here. These are 30 plus. I start losing count. But look, we found a way to add more weight. I've been trying to do 3 plates. 135. This is 225. All right, and I realized, I'm like, I bet you I can take one of these football bars, and it's wide enough in the way the bars are spaced, I can get it across my thigh. Sure enough, I could. It was, it's not super easy to get into position. I'm still having to stand up and down and put the 225 in, but it's not bad. Like, I feel like I could load more weight and do this. But here's the difference. That I felt that extra 90 pounds in the calves. It's like, all right, now we're getting somewhere. And then the same thing, so what do we do with the reverse hypers? I didn't want to load extra weight on them. Like, let me keep it as a tricep. Let's just keep them real strict and try to get at least 30 reps. So this ended up being 30 plus reps on leg extension, seated calf raises, reverse hypers. Yeah, it's a lot of volume. It's a lot of reps. Of course it is. But if we're going to be objective, we did some heavy singles, got the benefits. We did 10 to 12s for all these same muscles, right? 5 sets of roughly 10. I mean, the calf raises are a little more. Okay, that is definitely a hypertrophy sweet spot. And then we finished with some really high rep pump work at completely different angles for slightly smaller movements. All right. Has in the history of lifting it ever been a negative to do really high reps to finish your lower body off? I mean, really. Hasn't that produced pretty good results historically? Yeah. Do we have at least some potential evidence that, again, adding that really higher 3rd rep range may have its own set of hypertrophy benefits? Yeah. So, again, we did just a tiny amount of heavy singles to potentiate some things. Again, pretty well supported in literature. At this point, growing support. But then we really did meat and potatoes after that. 10 to 12. Every muscle done in a tricep. Like we worked the whole lower body because of a squat pattern, a glute ham raise, and then a standing calf raise, all at 10 to 12 for 5 sets each. That alone should produce good muscle growth, right? Just those middle 3 exercises we did. If that's all someone did, would their lower body actually get pretty good hypertrophy stimulus? I'm going to go with yes. I don't think any expert, I don't think any coach would disagree with that point. So then we get to this finishing work, and this is just hammering some serious metabolic fatigue, because now we're coming in and then finishing with some really high reps, right? And it's some really high reps I don't normally historically train to this degree. Reverse hypers I have in the past, by the way. But a lot of times it was like 5 sets of 25, hitting 30 plus, and trying to do them somewhat strict is a little different. But what are we doing there? Now we're getting metabolic fatigue and everything. Definitely those quads, because again, we're hitting a different angle on a small movement. All right, think about the low back involvement here. I got a great pump in my erectors doing this. Of course, I feel glutes and hamstrings. I always say that I feel glutes more on the reverse hyper when I've gone heavy than probably any other exercise. And I'm not saying mind-muscle connection is everything, because it's certainly not. But we can't ignore it. I don't think it would be fair to ignore it. But yeah, so we came in and just did all this really serious pump work. The end result, I'm going to rebuild my lower body up, because my legs have been bigger in the past. I mean, you guys saw me squat 600 before. My legs have been bigger. I think all of this will help me pump them back up to that. But here's the difference. Think about the stimulus to fatigue, particularly all this pump work at the end. All of this is no loading on the spine. All good stimulus to fatigue. Technically, we get traction on those reverse hypers. This is not hard to recover from. The real meat and potatoes were those middle 3 exercises. So again, I want people to understand these lower body vlogs right now. It is about just getting a little bit of heavy work, a very tiny amount right up front, just some heavy singles, and then those middle movements. That is again the meat and potatoes. And I know some of this is being repeated because this is a long vlog, and unless I just want to let the footage run without talking, and do what we got to do. So that is the real meat and potatoes. But then these are finishers. This final 3 movements, this is where we're like, okay, let's make sure those quads get a deep burn, make sure they get hit, make sure they get isolated. Especially because, again, like the rectus femoris, for example, may get understimulated on the squat patterns. Okay? The soleus definitely getting understimulated. Right? We're making sure it gets hit. Nice deep burn in it. Finish those calves off. Again, this is polishing. These polishing movements, just to put that last bit of size on. And then the reverse hypers, which you guys know how I feel about that. I feel that is bulletproof my back. That's the reason I feel like the reverse hyper is why I've been able to deadlift over 600 pounds fairly often with no low back strains, no low back pain, nothing like that. It's a big factor. But then you think about the potential for the erectors, glutes, everything else, and the whole posterior chain. Right? It's fantastic. It's fantastic, and it's great because of, again, that stimulus to fatigue. Like the reverse hyper is again, I know we could argue that active recovery, there's debates as to whether there is such a thing or if it's still just fatigue. It is historically, though, been used for that, for very high volumes, for a lot of powerlifters and athletes very successfully. Again, I'm not saying that is a fully scientifically supported idea. It's largely anecdote, but it does work. And I feel like my lower body is starting to fill back out, right? Starting to fill back out. And again, we look at all this too, and the other thing to think about, I'm on a very high carb diet, trying to keep my energy turnover high. Even if a lot of this ends up being these last movements, a lot of transient storage factors and glycogen storage in there, okay, fine. What's that do for my metabolic health? if I train my legs to have a higher insulin sensitivity and higher glycogen storage, what does that do for my overall metabolism, metabolic health, insulin sensitivity? I think it's worth a lot, especially for me as an older lifter, right? I think it's absolutely worth a lot. It's worth doing. But again, I'm still kind of in shock at how I look sitting up there doing the leg extensions at this point. It's like, okay, we've made some real progress. We're not where we need to be. I want to be clear, a long way to go. But the progress has been apparent, and I'm going to keep moving forward with it. All right, I don't feel like talking anymore. It's been over 20 minutes. So I'm going to let this vlog finish up. I hope it's been informative. I love all of you guys and gals, and I will talk to you next time.